Hey, this is Daniel Grove. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make these kind of renders in Blender. These are amazing for a variety of reasons. For any of you out there that do graphic design, there's often a time where you wish you had a specific pattern and you might be able to find that image, but you can't customize the size or the scale or certain attributes of that image because it's just an image. But in Blender, we're going to be able to make procedural patterns that can even be animated and even be used in three-dimensional ways using various techniques. But in Blender, you can make a lot of these patterns procedurally with nodes. You can use them as displacement maps. You can use them in 3D volumes. I think that's really the mark of any great program, is it's great because it can do things it was not designed to do. They didn't make Blender for you to generate patterns for Photoshop graphic design or video transitions or polka dot patterns. That's not what it was made for, but it can do that and so much more. Now, if you love this type of procedural art and you're interested in getting way more control over patterns and shapes, please check out my procedural shapes shader. I made, I think, 13 or 14 different node groups, which is basically a self-contained shader that produces really useful and tweakable basic shapes, such as dots, squares, triangles, grids, all kinds of stuff, all the in-betweens. And they're really handy for layering and building and making photorealistic type stuff from the basic building blocks of shapes and geometry. So if you love it, go check that out. Super cheap online. If you have any interest in this video, after you're done with it, you'll love that product. Let's get started with a really fun one that I find particularly helpful because I do video editing, and that is a video transition procedural animation. As with all these animations I'm going to make, we're going to start with a plane. So Shift A, click on Mesh and Plane. Here's a cool keyboard shortcut, which I'm going to show plenty of in this video. Let's just face it, Blender is about 90% keyboard shortcuts. That's just how it is. So on your numpad section of your keypad, press the period key and then press 7. So period zooms into your selected object and 7 gives you a flat above view. I'm going to switch to the Eevee render engine, which I never ever use because what we're doing today is not photorealistic. It's very stylized. And we're going to stick with black and white for now, but you can, of course, add all kinds of amazing color schemes and layers and even grime and dirt textures to these things later to really bring them to life for various uses. But we're going to make them nice and clean and cut with black and white for today. Hope it doesn't give you any headaches because it almost gave me a few headaches. So we're in Eevee. On our plane, we're going to go to the Materials tab, make a new material, and we're going to turn down Specular, turn up Roughness, and then turn up your emissions to 4 because we're going to be plugging in these procedural materials or nodes rather, into the emissions so that they're just as strong as white and black as we can get them. We're going to delete our light object right there. That way there's no light, fall off. There's no shadows, nothing weird. We just want black and white. And it's going to give it to us when we do this. Okay, so let's split our screen by putting our mouse right in that intersection right there. Click and drag straight down. And we're going to use this top view for our nodes. Let's clean our UI up a little bit by pressing the letter T to get rid of our tools. Put your mouse down in the bottom part, press T. Up in the top half, go to your editor type and change it to shader editor. Now we have all our nodes. Let's, with our mouse here, press in to get rid of that side panel. Awesome. All right, so let's start with the basic polka dot pattern, and I'll show you how to animate this and make it into a really nice wiping, endless, repeating transition, which you can use for video editing or other stuff. So press Shift A, click on search, and type in VOR, Verona Texture. Let's put that right around here. Let's plug in the distance to emissions. There we go. So make sure you're in rendered view so that we get that. Okay, turn your randomness down to 0. And now we can't quite see it. You can almost see it, but there's a very slight kind of squarey, soft blurred square pattern going on. Press 7 to go back to that above view. And let's press Shift A and make a ramp node, RAM, right there. Set this to constant and put your white point to about 0.5. Well, actually a little bit higher. There we go. So we get black polka dots. Cool. Now we want this to wipe left to right. And we wanted to basically create a transition. Now this is all nice and dandy, but I cannot animate this position variable. And I really wish that Blender would add some node inputs for these things. But as of now, there isn't. So I did find an interesting trick using the map range node that allows me to basically animate a gradient map and with some interesting controls. So let's do that right now. I'm going to actually click on this and type Control X, which deletes it, but maintains the noodle. Did you know that's called noodle? It is. I've got a whole video on noodles and nodes. It's a really good one. So let's do Shift A, click search, and type in map. And here's the map range. Really cool. It's basically the black to white gradient map with the basic controls where Minimum is your position of your black. So I can move it up and make it blacker, put it back to 0. And then my max is the position of the white marker, which was on the right. I can drag it down to make it brighter, which you can't really see. Put that back at 1. And then the to minimum is how black it is, whether it's black, which is 0, or 50% gray, or all the way up to 1, which would be white. Put it back to 0. And then to max is how white the white marker is. So you can make it darker too. So you can basically invert them. See that? I'm making my white point, which is the whitest pixel in that gradient, not very white. It's back to almost to black. So let's leave that at 1. So here's my cool trick. I'm going to use a math node. Don't worry, we're not going to get crazy. I hate math. Don't worry. But we're going to control the position of the black and white marker, and we're going to put them right up next to each other so that it is essentially a constant color ramp. So that black, extreme black to white, super high contrast that we showed earlier. So Shift A, let's make a value. This is our number that we're going to use to set the threshold, basically. Plug value into minimum, which is our position of black, and then plug this into value 1, and the output to from max. So this value controls where the black marker is, and then this we'll add to it. We're going to add .1. And now this is the same value as, let's put this .5. So if my value is .5, now it's .6 coming out of this node, controlling the white point. So they're pretty close together, but we can make them even closer by dragging this, holding Shift, and dragging it to an even smaller number. So now look at this. We almost have a constant ramp. It's really close. And we can make this like .001. That's basically a constant ramp. It's very contrasty, right? Cool. So now we can actually control the scale of these dots, because earlier we couldn't really control the scale in any animated way, because the scale here is just the overall size of everything, which just looks really weird. But the scale is just like the overall, how many dots there are, like that. Put that back at 5. And let's change there we go. Okay, so I don't want to get too complicated here because this is the very first one. Maybe I should have started with an easier one, but this is a really cool trick right here, this animatable constant ramp here. So next we're going to do a wave texture. Shift A, search WAVE, wave texture. And this makes, if I control shift click this, look, it just makes a basic, window blinds waves, right? And let's put it at 1 for a scale. And this is cool because this is our moving left to right transition that we're going to apply to the size of these dots. Hang in there with me. I'll show you how. Click on wave texture, press Control T. This gives us a basic mapping setup. We're going to keep this as it is generated. And if we hold shift and drag our X value, it's literally sliding this infinitely to the left or right. It's never going to end. So let's type in place of a number, let's actually do a really cool trick here. This is what I call auto animating or drivers. Type in number sign or pound sign or hashtag if you're millennial, and then type in the word frame, multiply, which is an asterisk, .01. So we're multiplying the frame number by 1/100th or .01, decimal 01. Now, if we press play, which for me is shift spacebar, look at that. The frame number times .01 will be the new value for the X for this wave, and it's forever going to shift to the left. If we want to go the other way, we can make it a negative .01, but I'm going to keep it like that. Now let's plug this black and white value of these window blinds into right here. So actually, I'm going to go to search and type in RER, reroute, put it here, plug it in here. Oops. Remove that. There we go. We can actually get rid of our value. And we have this little reroute here. This little reroute thing is really cool because we can plug stuff into it. So we're going to plug this into there. And I'm going to get back to normal viewing mode because right now I'm just previewing this wave texture. So Control Shift click our BSDF. And we got something funky going on here. We still have a few little things we need to do. I'm going to change my Verona texture actually to a 2D Verona texture. Okay, now we got something else weird going on. That's okay. And let's make our scale really small. So like .1. Oh my goodness. Things are happening. This looks cool. Even smaller. So the smaller the scale, the larger these window blind waves are, right? The waves. So the bigger it is, the more slow and smooth this transition is going to be. This modification of the threshold of these boring polka dots. That's basically what we're doing. We're modifying the threshold of these polka dots in a dynamic wave with a gradient that forever moves to the left. And now we've got this really cool thing here. And we can adjust even the smoothness. If we want this to be smoother, look at this. I'm turning up my split, right? This is the split between these two values of minimum and maximum. And now it has a little bit of a blur. If we want it to be harsh, we can keep it at .001 and keep it like that. Let's change our scale of our Verona up to maybe 10. Yeah, now we got smaller dots. Do 25. There we go. Looks cool. Make this a little bit bigger. Very, very satisfying. You can do this also with squares by changing the Verona type to Chebyshev, and voila. Now instead of boring square pyramids, they are ever-changing sizes based on that wave that is moving left and right. Pretty fun. Like I said, this can be used really nicely for video transitions or something kind of comic booky and fun. All right, let's put this one over here. And I'm actually going to hide it so that my computer is no longer processing it. Let's make another one. Shift A, plane. All right, now instead of making a new material, we're going to use that same old material that we did with the transitioning squares. We're actually going to make a new one out of this. So click on this little double page thing, which makes a new identical material with its own unique name, which we can modify. And the original one, which is hidden, will not be changed. So that's great. So now instead of a wave texture modifying the size of these dots, let's change this into a actual noise, like a Musgrave noise texture. And here's a cool trick. We can actually swap out one node for another really easily by pressing Shift S. Instead of Shift A to add, do Shift S, and it says switch type to. What do you want to switch it to? We're going to do Musgrave. And by the way, this is a keyboard shortcut built into the Node Wrangler add-on. So pretty sure that's enabled by default by now, but Shift S will switch it to a Musgrave texture. And I don't see anything yet. That means we need to make a few changes here. So let's change this to, let's actually delete this movement. So right click on it and do delete driver. Okay, and then change this to a 4D noise. There we go, I see something. And let's play with our scale. Oh my gosh, look at that. Let's go way up. Maybe not too high up. Cool. So our Musgrave noise, which should look like this, is basically these black and white values are controlling the size of each individual square coming out of this. So we can set the grid size maybe to 100. So basically like pixels. And then this noise is going to control how big and small those pixels are. So let's preview our BSDF. And we got this cool stuff. And we can, of course, animate this in a really cool way because we put this noise texture up here as 4D. We can animate the W scale. So let's type in $ frame. Oh, don't misspell it. Frame times 0.01. It's a little fast. I'm going to add another 0 in there. There we go. Nicely evolving. Very cool. And this noise has no detail right now. It's very just blobby and basic. So we can turn up the detail and then we can turn down the dimensions ever so slightly to get just more octaves, more detail in there. And that looks pretty cool. There's so many things you can use this for right here as just a generic VFX element. You can overlay this on top of holograms. You can overlay this on top of screens, all kinds of stuff, just to give a cool, cool moving and techno feel to it. And remember down here, we have our split value, which is how different the black and white are, or rather how far apart they are. So if we turn it up, now our squares are pretty soft. We can actually see them, little pyramid shapes, which really changes the feel. There's a lot more dirt visible. If you go up really high, the black and whites are really far apart. But, oh, there we go, inverted, we go negative. That's another cool thing about map range up here, this map range node, that the color ramp can't do is negative values. As far as I know, yeah, the color ramp can't do negatives, but map range can. That's cool. You can change this to dots as well by going to Euclidean. Also, now we got little circles. Let's make them nice and crunchy. There we go, real dirty. And the dirt of the noise is distorting these circles. Isn't that crazy? So we can maybe turn the detail down or the dimension up. There we go. Now they're just kind of blobbing around, getting bigger and smaller based on what the noise is doing. Pretty cool. All right, let's do a really cool abstract one. I love this circle one, especially when it animates because it looks so darn cool. It's a little bit simpler than the ones we've already made because there's no math nodes required. So let's drag this guy over here. Whoop, and hide it by clicking the monitor. If you don't see your monitor, go to your filter options and toggle on your monitor option. That hides an object and it stops your PC from processing it. So it saves you some computer power. Shift A, make a new plane. It's right there in the middle. If it's not, Alt G resets your locations to 0, 0, 0. Make a new material, and let's turn down our specular, up our roughness, and our emission strength up to 4. Now over here, we're going to make, you guessed it, another Verona texture. Verona is such a great starting point for many patterns and shapes. So let's choose Euclidean, which is already by default. Keep it at F1. Make this a 4D noise pattern so that we have this W factor we can move and basically evolve the noise with. And let's make 2 more of these. And the scales are going to be different from each other. So this first one, you can leave the scale at 5. Let's Shift D, put this one scale right here at, I don't know, 2, and then one more, scale it at 1. All right. Now we're going to make, we're going to pass these noise patterns through a color ramp, and the color ramp's going to have a lot of contrast, like the ones that we did earlier. But because we don't need to animate these color ramps, we can leave them as color ramps. We don't need to swap them out for anything else. So put them as constant, and let's make it, lots of contrast. This makes random dots all over the place. If you turn your random down, they're literally a grid like we did earlier, but we want these to be random, so we're going to keep that up high. All right, let's move this one down, Shift D, and we can actually add more contrast to these other dots of different scale. We're going to preview this one. Oh, bigger dots, that's good. But I want there to be some rings inside there. Make another color marker by pressing the plus button and change it to white. Okay, make another one. It's black. You can put it in between. And now look what we have. The values, instead of going smoothly from black to white, are going harshly from black to white. And you can put these really close together to make little rings, make little polka dots in the middle. One white, then another black one next to it. So that as these things evolve, we see this really cool, these cool rings kind of coming through that. Now what I'm doing right there is I'm moving my W factor, which we will animate in a little bit, don't worry. Now we got another one down here. So Shift D, this color ramp, plug it in, plug this one into emissions. We're going to combine all these in just a second. This is the really big one. See, the scale is set to 1. So maybe move these color things around to get something different. Like that. Okay. And now let's use some mix RGB nodes. I love this one. So Shift A, search, type in mix RGB. This allows us, let me just zoom in here, guys, so you can see better. This allows us to combine 2 sources into one. And it will be layered just how Photoshop does, because we have all these blend modes. So the really crazy one is difference. All right. And let's plug this in so we can see what's happening. We got this, turning your factor all the way up. And now our 2 different ring patterns, which are of different scales, are getting differenced on top of each other, which in the case of black and white, basically just inverts each other. And we can do it again for a 3rd level, Shift D, plug in this guy to the input number 2. And now it's differencing the big one, which is these big ones right here, the really big circles. Cool. So we got this really neat abstract, thing going on, very pop arty from the 60s. And we can animate them super easily by going to W, type in pound frame times dot 001. There you go. That one's kind of fast. Let's go to the next one. W factor, pound frame times dot 0005. So even that's half as slow. And then the big one, pound frame times dot 0002. Now, the big circles are very slowly moving. You can change that by clicking on it and making that last number, like maybe 4. And you of course have all your controls up here of how the dots, how black or white they are. You can change the scale, a bunch of little ones. I like to be a little bit closer in scale so that as they move, they really just mess with each other. Like that. It looks like raindrops and ripples. Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Okay, so far we've made these. Let's drag this one and put it over here. And I'm going to hide all three of them again. I think I'm going to do 2 more. And then that'll be, I could just keep going and make this like a 2-hour long video. Maybe I'll make a part 2 if you guys really like it. But yeah, let's make a square based one. We've done a lot of squares. Shift A, plane, new texture, low specular, high roughness, emission strength at 4. And we're going to make a Verona. Was that someone's last name? I should probably learn the history behind these things that I keep saying. Turn our random down to 0 and change this to Chebyshev so we can get some nice squares. This is totally going to be the most simple one, but it's going to hold a really awesome trick that you can use in so many ways. Shift A, ramp, plug it into right here. Give it a little bit of oomph, a little bit of contrast, dark and lights. There we go. And we're going to actually use this instead of use this as like our, finished result, which you can't even see anything yet. We're going to, there we go. Now I can see it. Instead of using this like this, we're going to actually use this as a normals map, which is totally wrong, but it looks totally cool. So Shift A, type in wave texture, plug it in right there. So now our square pattern is a normals map, which is totally just screwing up our waves, which if you remember from the first one is just window blinds, right? Let's get it to a good point, maybe 6. Sometimes the number, there we go. Maybe even numbers work better for this. And it is tileable, of course. See that how it cuts off on the edge? Perfect. You can totally tile this as an image for a background of a graphic or whatever. Or if you want to animate it, you totally can by playing with your phase offset. Ooh, trippy. So let's animate that by clicking on it. Type in pound frame.001. See what it does. We zoom in. Let's make it a little bit faster. There we go. .01. Okay, still really slow. .1. It's sliding inwards infinitely. And the middle point is, of course, going between the wave black and then the gap white. So pretty trippy. Kind of gives you a little bit of a headache. Maybe an optical illusion or something like that. But I mean, as a still, I mean, this is a great, very usable texture. You can turn it into a pattern in Photoshop. You can use it as like a nice subtle background on a pamphlet or a YouTube thumbnail or something like that. Or, hey, this is a cool bump map or a displacement map. Render this as like a 32-bit EXR, and you've got a sweet displacement map, which you can use on stuff to make some really neat shapes. And don't forget roughness maps too. This could be a roughness map. I mean, heck, you can make your own PBR shaders just from this type of stuff. One more, we're going to make a super abstract blobby thing. Shift A, plane, new material, no specular, high roughness, transmission, emission strength at 4. So we're going to do a similar thing that we did earlier where we're using one pattern to be the normals map, or rather the vector. I think it's a vector map is more accurate of another noise. So let's make a wave texture. This is actually going to use 2 different wave texture right there. Oop, zoom out. Let's plug this into emission color. There we go. And voila, super boring window blinds. Let's add a mix RGB right here, plug it into vector, and then we're going to plug in a Verona texture into the bottom input of mix RGB and use the distance output as color 2. And then we're going to use good old normal vector data into input number 1. So I think you can click on this mix and press Control T, move it over here. And it's close. To delete this image texture, press Control X. Okay, I'm just making more work for myself. There we go. And use object. Object coordinates starts at the center point of the object, whereas UV starts from the corner and generated, I think, is from the corner as well. Not very helpful for what we're going to do, because this is going to be a super cool pattern that's going to extend outwards from the center in all directions. So we're going to be mixing between traditional vector coordinates, which is this, and non-traditional Verona texture coordinates, which is super weird. But we do want the Verona texture, which is these blobs, to also come from the center. So we're going to use 2 different transform nodes, plug an object to there, plug this into there, okay? Now the reason for this is that we can control these independently. So I can shift the coordinates of one without shifting the coordinates of this guy. Now let's put our mix mode right here of mix RGB into multiply. Ooh, already looking pretty interesting. Look at that, we got a weird split down the middle. And let's modify some of these wave texture settings. So let's put the scale at 2, detail at 10, detail scale at 30, roughness, detail roughness at .8. There we go. And this on our Verona down here, which is kind of our displacing noise, we're going to put the randomness at 0 and the scale at 2. Oh, I forgot one thing on our wave texture. Let's change the shape from bands to rings, and then the like coordinate or whatever direction to spherical. Awesome. Look at this. Now to top it all off, let's add some really cool color ramp stuff to add some contrast. So add a color ramp right there. Put it as constant. And let's just start going crazy with black and whites. Woo, that was cool. Awesome. And then of course to animate it, we're going to play with the phase offset. So pound frame dot 001. All right, let's try 1 0. Let's make it a little bit faster. 0.5. There we go. Cool. And I don't like it going that direction. Let's make it reverse it by making a negative value. There we go. Cool. You can get all kinds of different lines and thicknesses and details. And like I said earlier, you can add color. Like I'm not great with color schemes. I'm not that type of artist. I'm also not very fashionable, so maybe that's all connected together. But if you want to throw some colors up in here, you can of course add color, do all kinds of cool stuff. As a still, it's fun. As animated, it's even cooler. Why not animate it, right? Just for the heck of it. Okay, I'll do one more. Sure, why not? I know I can hear you through time travel of the internet, listening to everything. I can hear you saying, one more, Daniel, please, one more, please. So Shift A, let's do this cool animated square one, which is really fun to watch. And let's do new material. You know the routine, specular, roughness, Mason strength at 4. Okay. Now we're going to use, once again, a Verona texture to mess up a wave texture. Wave textures are great to use because they just provide you with basic lines, right? Which is really handy. And they have a lot of options. I haven't even touched most of the options in the wave texture. I barely even touched them. They're very flexible and they can do a lot of cool stuff. So Verona is going to mess up a wave texture right here. Plug in your distance into vector, this into emissions color. And we already got that. Now we're going to make our Verona shape into a square by using Chebyshev. Turn your random down all the way. Okay, now we can't see anything yet. We need to add a little bit of we need to give it a starting point or coordinates. So click on your Verona and Control T and use object coordinates so that everything kind of just starts from the center as far as our scale is concerned. See our scale is coming from the bottom corner because I'm using UV, use object. There we go. Now when we mess with our scale, well, there we go. It goes from the center, which me likey. So I'm going to use not 1, which shows in the middle of this tiling of 9. Try 0.5. Perfect. Now I got 1 square. I like it. Let's animate our phase offset. So pound frame times 0.01. Press play. It's super slow. Let's do 0.1. There we go. Now I like a lot of contrast. So Shift A, make another color ramp. Put it on constant. There we go. Now we can add a lot more detail by using the aforementioned settings on the wave texture. So turn your distortion to like 4 or 5. This just adds basically wiggliness and, variety. You got your detail slider as well. You can play with detail scale, which is a nice one. This is adding tiny little lines. Now, if I just stop it, look, we're getting fine little lines. I'm going to turn down my detail scale. Closer to 0, you get less of those. You have it way up, there's probably too many. But somewhere between 0 and maybe 20 or something like that is cool. We've got roughness also that just kind of moves things around, slices it up into fine little barcodes. Cool. Pressing play. And there's so much detail shuffling through this color ramp. It just looks like it's like flickering. If we put this on ease, it might look a little bit more natural. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah. Ooh, that's kind of weird. It's like phasing in and out. It's because there's so much detail. Let's turn our detail down to like 2. This detail to maybe like 4. Yeah. Interesting. So now we got a little square wormhole here we're falling into or out of. I don't know. I'm about to become hypnotized here. I should probably press stop before I forget who I am. So as you see, lots of possibilities, tons of fun. Just play with stuff, trial and error. As you get a cool result, save it and then make a brand new material from that, and you'll have all the different variations that you created. Well, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you didn't get a migraine, and I also hope you'll come back very soon. Have a great week.